On the line, Iowa's Northwest Area Education Agency, or AEA, says it is losing about 10% of its workforce because of an overhaul touted by Governor Kim Reynolds and passed by Iowa lawmakers. The AEA provides services like library materials, continuing education classes for teachers, and behavioral help for school districts and their students. KTIV's Matt Hoffman joins us after attending an AEA Board of Directors meeting this afternoon where the departures were announced. And Matt, did these staff members, did they resign or were they actually terminated?
Yeah, to be honest with you, Larry, the answer is both. Some staff retired, some resigned, but 2 were fired as part of workforce reduction, meaning the termination was no fault of their own. The AEA reform bill takes certain pots of money away from the AEA's control, giving more power to local districts and some to the Iowa Department of Education. The AEA Board of Directors met in a virtual special session on Monday. Board members voted unanimously to accept the retirement of 4 employees, resignation of 7, and termination of 2. Dan Cox, the chief administrator, says the AEA has lost about 10% of its staff.
The practical effect is that there's been a big impact on people, that the uncertainty has really caused some people to say, I need a job that is more certain.
Now, Cox gave some examples of what the AEA provides. Those examples include classes for teachers to fulfill continuing education requirements, science kits and other materials to school districts, and a large focus on special education. Under the new law, school districts, not the AEAs, will eventually control 100% of funds for professional learning and media services, with local districts also gaining another 10% share of those special education funds.
All of that falls under media, plus our tech integrationists who are out working with teachers in classrooms to integrate technology more fully.
Now, the chief administrator says he doesn't expect any more cuts this year as a result of the bill, though some jobs may be transferred to the State Department of Education. According to the Des Moines Register, nearly 350 employees have resigned or retired from Iowa's 9 AEAs since the start of the year. Pete Iverson, the coordinator of communications, says the AEA will need to be more persuasive to get school districts to continue to use their services instead of spending those funds elsewhere.
The more persuasive that we are and the more proactive we are, possibly we could prevent positions from being eliminated.
Now, not all of the employee departures on Tuesday related to the new law. One licensed social worker said her position, quote, lacked clinical supervision and the, quote, necessary support for therapists. And Scott Cox, pointed out another issue. The new law doesn't require districts to tell the AEA if they plan to continue using their services by any set deadline. Without a deadline, he says, it's difficult to budget and inform the local districts what services they will or won't be able to offer, Larry.